at the game, I don't place that fact. Once you let me go, no, you never come back. I'ma be the best that you never had. I'ma kick back when you fake like that. Head out at the game, I don't place that fact. Once you let me go, no, you never come back. I'ma be the best that you never had. I'ma kick, 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 I'ma be the best that you never had. Rumpa pa pa, rumpa pa pa, see I got it. Rumpa pa pa, rumpa pa pa, do you want it? I don't flex, I'm success. Effortless, I'm like a rumpa pa pa, rumpa pa pa, see I got it. I don't flex, I'm success. I don't flex, I'm success. I don't flex, I'm success. Effortless, see I got it. I don't flex, I'm success. I don't flex, I'm success. I don't flex, I'm success. Effortless, see I. I'ma kick, 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 I'ma be the best that you never had. Rumpa pa pa, rumpa pa pa, see I got it. Rumpa pa pa, rumpa pa pa, do you want it? I don't flex, I'm success. Effortless, I'm like a rumpa pa pa, rumpa pa pa, see I got it. Rumpa pa pa, rumpa pa pa, see I got it. Rumpa pa pa, rumpa pa pa, do you want it? I don't flex, I'm success. Effortless, I'm like a rumpa pa pa, rumpa pa pa, see I got it. Rumpa pa pa, rumpa pa pa, see I got it. Rumpa pa pa, rumpa pa pa, do you want it? Want it, want it, want it, want it.
How y'all doing today? I'm apologize in advance for being a little bit delayed starting this. Initially, I wanted to talk about draft prospects. And as such things go, sometimes someone said, "What is that intro? Are you asking for music?" I'll add it in the credits. Someone forwarded me an article 20 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, and it just completely disrupted my plans. It was fairly predictable that it was going to happen. That article was written before it even, before the press conference yesterday. So if you are watching this after the fact, just skip 10 minutes ahead, and I'm going to get to the draft stuff, right? But first I want to address something. Yesterday during the presser, Scottie did a very candid review of his season, and he talked about conditioning. And I worried that sometimes with candor and honesty, talking about, being the minutes leader for the team at age 21, playing two ways, how he wants to improve his conditioning, get stronger. And I wondered, in conjunction with Fred VanVleet's comments suggesting that Scottie needs to be a gym rat, get in the gym, how this was setting up for a Doug Smith or Michael Grange article. And then it drops. So there it is. Now, I'm going to read a little bit of this for you. Actually, I'm going to read a lot of it for you because it was aggravating. It was absolutely insulting, and it was completely disingenuous. But I think that, hang on, I'm just going to pull this up. Where is it? Here we go. The Toronto Raptors message to Scottie Barnes: "Get in the gym." Quote, "As the Raptors head into their summer earlier on the calendar than any year of the last decade, they go with the knowledge that the next few months is when the important work gets done." Okay, fair enough, but acting like this is the worst team in recent memory is disingenuous. The Tampa season was worse, but earlier in the season, okay, I get it. Because that was a shortened season, and technically he's correct. But again, a little bit of a disingenuous point. It's when skills get it's when skill sets are expanded and finely tuned, when the basic conditioning programs begin, when players decide if they truly want to get better, or if they want to play lip service to the work ethic needed for genuine improvement. Can you hear me shaking my head? It is a time when organizations find out who is a professional and who is a poseur, and they will act according to the work players do to improve. Many eyes in Toronto will be focused on Scottie Barnes. Okay. Months ago, several sources indicated displeasure with Barnes' work regimen in his first NBA offseason. Some chalked it up to a young player not really getting it. This time around, the Raptors have already started putting the pressure on Barnes publicly. Now, this is not true. Technically, the Raptors have started putting pressure on, or Fred VanVleet has started. The quote, "Just get in the lab, that's it. That is the only thing I ever tell him," guard Fred VanVleet said of his advice to Barnes. Quote, "Scottie is going to be as good as he wants to be, as good as he wants to be as a player. I don't think there's anything he can't do on the court, but just be a gym rat. Stay in the gym. That will speed up the process, and he's doing that." O.G Anunoby, quote, "Just be himself, work hard every day." Nick Nurse, quote, He's got to get a lot of time in the gym and continue to work on his offensive skills, handling, shooting, finishing, all the things that he can do to really put pressure on teams as a scorer," end quote. It was a bit eye-opening to hear Barnes admit Thursday that he wasn't in good enough shape this season. Quote, "I probably need a different level of conditioning for the way I want to play." There is no question that Barnes possesses the physical attributes to put him among the top players in the league. Between now and September, we'll see if he's got the mental toughness to do it. No one has a clear answer to that question yet. This is absolutely ridiculous. Now, I promise we'll get to the draft prospects that I want to talk about, but first, I just want to address this. This is a hit piece. I think that's pretty clear. Hopefully it's pretty obvious to you. Now, I talked about this. Sorry, I mean, my lighting is horrible. Give me one sec. Now, now it doesn't seem like anyone is paying too much attention to this, given the fact that this has been a bit of a recurring narrative throughout the year. And this isn't surprising to anyone in the least right now, but this is a damning article. This article is really poking at Barnes' work ethic as a scapegoat for what has just happened. Now, if you read Twitter right now, Reddit, Real GM, I mean, honestly, just read the comment section under Yahoo's last Instagram post. Everything is get Fred VanVleet out of here. Fred VanVleet is trash. Fred VanVleet shot blah, 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 blah. He's selfish. I'd get him rid for nothing. So the public sentiment is clearly, Fred is a problem, right? I don't think anyone has an issue with how Scottie played yesterday. Obviously, he's got work to do. What 21-year-old could you not say that about? But the idea of using people in the media. Now, Fred VanVleet, Doug Smith, right? Buddy. I always found it very curious, and I called it out yesterday during our live stream that this article was coming. I also called the previous article that was coming the day before during the post game. So literally, I'm calling out these guys' articles before they're writing them. If you can understand the questions they're asking, you know exactly what they're poking at. These guys are so transparent. And I think that this is an issue because you really are, you're sort of like creating a false narrative around this guy, right? You're saying he doesn't work hard. Well, first of all, Fred VanVleet's takes on Scottie Barnes should not be taken as gospel, right? I mean, you don't have to read the tea leaves you could read the tea leaves, you can read the body language, you can, read into a lot of stuff, that these are not two players who seem to have the greatest relationship on or off the court. They often, seem to butt heads on the court. They can say all the right stuff in the pressers, but at the end of the day, you have to wonder where all this stuff is coming from about Scottie's work ethic, because nothing that you ever heard about him at Florida State, nothing that you ever heard about him in high school, and he had demanding coaches at Montverde and a demanding coach at FSU. Go back and listen to what Leonard Hamilton said about Scottie Barnes at FSU. Did he just stop working hard? Is that what I'm supposed to believe? I mean, if you can't see the growth in his game from year 1 to year 2, or even from FSU to year 2 or FSU to year 1, the fact the guy won Rookie of the Year when he was considered a no-level scorer, I mean, yeah, he's a top 4 pick, but he's a top 4 pick on future projected value. Most people were flabbergasted that he went in the top 5, right? Most people had him at 7, 8, 6. Some people, as early as January, had him outside the top 10. The idea that this guy not only climbed past Evan Mobley, but also Cade Cunningham and Jalen Green and won Rookie of the Year while playing 5th option, 4th option on the Raptors should be a glowing endorsement for his work ethic and the work that he put in. But of course, that's not the story that Fred VanVleet and Doug Smith want you to believe. Recently, a friend of this channel and a friend of mine, Sean Stevenson, went back and forth with CJ Miles, another big Fred VanVleet supporter in the media space now, suddenly an ex-teammate. And of course, CJ and Amit Mann are the guys that Fred did that bullshit interview with, where he talked about how NBA fans can't tell him anything and how effectively he's a top 50 player, and it's unquestionably a top 50 player, humbly a top 50 player. And that basically this interview, that no fan can tell him anything about the NBA, and that effectively then the next day, I think he went out and shot that 2 for 14 and everyone was trolling him. This guy is going back and forth with fans on Twitter defending Fred VanVleet like he's his firstborn child. Then his wife is getting involved, and I swear, don't make me release. This shit is public. I'm not doxing anybody. This shit's public. Go on Twitter and look at it, right? He's going back and forth with fans. His wife is now coming to his defense, and you look at her page, and it's just Freddie everywhere. What is it with these people? And why is it that everyone who supports Fred just wants to just go at Scottie? It's so weird. But it is false consciousness, okay? They need a scapegoat. And I think Scottie makes an easy mark, right? He's very honest. He's bluntly honest with the media. He didn't throw his teammates under the bus. Didn't throw the bench under the bus. Didn't throw Fred under the bus. Didn't say, maybe there's leadership issues on this. He didn't do that. But Fred VanVleet, when given the chance, we need a new system, okay? That puts Nurse's job in question. Good job, Nick Nurse. Tried to get the guy paid. Now he puts your system under. The roster sometimes doesn't make sense. Funky rosters. Boom. That's management. Look at the Heavy article, the Heavy.com article. Everything about. I've been screaming about this for 2 years. Everything. So basically, if you want to know who your inside source is that has issues with Scottie's work ethic, look no further. It's Fred VanVleet. All right. So I got that off my chest, right? We got that going. All right. Let's take a look a little bit at the comments here. Yeah, we already did. I mean, in our last live, we looked at it, and yeah, I mean, look, like, I'm a big O.G Anunoby fan, right? He's had balance issues for 3 years. He's had durability issues for 4 years. He has barely improved over 5 years. His shooting has sometimes regressed, sometimes gone up. Can you realistically tell me that O.G Anunoby has made some sort of transformative leap in his game over the last 4 years? Probably not, right? I mean, there's bits and pieces. I've never heard anyone question his work ethic. Precious Achiuwa became a much worse shooter this year. Did anyone question his work ethic? Nope. Pascal Siakam. He shot worse from 3 this year. Did anyone question his work ethic? Fred VanVleet had a ton of durability issues last year. Did anyone question his preparedness for the season? Did you do enough work in the offseason? This work ethic issue has only ever really come from 2 people, and they keep citing these sources. And I'm telling you, I know who their sources are. I really hope that Masai Ujiri is asked about how he feels about Scottie's work ethic. Dear media, when you do Masai's end of year press conference, please ask him, how does he feel about the work ethic of a Scottie Barnes? Because I'm tired of hearing this addressed. I'm tired because I get angry, and I understand that certain people are not getting angry, and that's fine. But personally, as someone who has watched this media pepper in little bits and pieces about people in the past and literally destroy their reputation years down the line as something comes out or something implodes. Like if Scottie has, like, let's say for instance, I mean, I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just saying if he struggles coming out of the gate next year, the entire narrative is already written. He didn't work hard enough in the offseason. Do you see what I mean? But as I said 4 months ago when this shit came out, as I said 3 months ago when this shit went away, if you're saying it, I just want to know how you know. Were you there with him? Because the people who were there with him swear he's working really hard. He would probably tell you he's working really hard. The very idea that he says he needs to get his conditioning to another level, I mean, you don't think that he came back stronger this year? I mean, just imagine telling somebody that looks like this to get in the gym and that they have conditioning issues. Do I need to flash a picture of Doug Smith right now to make this very obvious how like ridiculous that is? All right. Moving on. The draft. Okay. So the way I see it, the Raptors have one major asset on their table, and in about 4 hours, we'll understand just how valuable that asset will be. Because if you are a Raptor fan, you need to be praying that the Chicago Bulls and the Oklahoma City Thunder win their games tonight. This would effectively move us, I believe, to 11th place. However, if both teams lose their play-in matchup with the Miami Heat and Minnesota Timberwolves respectively, then we would be back down to 13, in which case I think our options will be somewhat limited. However, I thought it would be a really good time right now to look at four prospects. I initially wanted to look at 3, but I'm actually going to look at 4. These are not the only 4 prospects that I think the Raptors could look at, but these are 4 prospects that I would like the Raptors to look at. and they're all like different, and they have like, there's various reasons to look at all of them. So I'm going to start, let me see if I can pull up the video here. All right. Okay. So I'm going to start with Rayan Rupert. Okay, so with Rupert, I think one of the greatest things about this guy is his length. And we know that the Raptors absolutely love longer defenders. He's also one of the youngest players in the draft. He's foreign. And honestly, he's got like incredible athletic potential. I've seen him play on defense. And I swear it's not just because they come from the same country, but there's parts of him as a French player. I mean, French speaking Canada. I've seen flashes of Matisse Thybulle. I think that might be hyperbole, to be honest, but he's got the same metrics. He's got a 7'2" wingspan. He's been rising up the draft boards. This is NBA Draft Room's scouting report on him, so just going to read this out. Rayan Rupert is a really interesting wing prospect from great basketball bloodlines who is far from a finished product, but flashes big upside and projects well up to the next level. His season in the NBL was cut short by a wrist injury, but he's already showed enough ability and flashes of upside to warrant a mid-first round selection. Rupert is a prototypical 3-and-D wing with great length and a lot of versatility. He slides his feet well, has great lateral movement and overall agility. Has quick hands and gets a lot of steals and deflections. In other words, he's very disruptive. While he's not a consistent enough three-point shooter, I can hear every Raptor fan just out on this guy right now. He does show a lot of promise and will likely become a very capable floor spacer at the next level. His ball handling and playmaking ability are a bit underrated, and I think he has a lot of untapped potential initiating offense. Look for his draft stock to rise in the pre-draft process as teams get a closer look at him. Honestly, it has already been rising, and there are a lot of players like this where you give them like a couple, you give them pro day, you give them like a couple interviews, and they rise up. This is how I felt about Dyson Daniels last year, and he absolutely like improved his stock. So I think, to be honest, like I think he's one of those players where I think he could pop and he could work himself into the lottery. Now, in terms of the draft philosophy, like for the Raptors, I mean, they could go a couple of different ways, right? you're obviously looking at this roster and you're saying they can't shoot. And if one of Gary or Fred go, they really can't shoot because those are two of your better shooters. And if you end up trading O.G Anunoby potentially for draft picks, well, now you really can't shoot because he's one of your most consistent shooters too. So the idea of taking either Rupert or hypothetically taking Anthony Black possibly scares some people off because it seems like, wow, do we not already have enough non-shooters with potentially Jakob, Poetl, and, if Scottie Barnes doesn't take a big step there, or if Pascal Siakam doesn't take a big step there, we already have a bunch of guys who can't really put the ball in the basket consistently. However, I question the narrative, right? Because, so much of, do we have shooters? Do we not have shooters? I mean, you have shooters. You have Will Barton. You had, Joe Weiskamp. He's on the bench. Can't get off. It's not like you don't have shooting. I mean, it's a very convenient narrative. I mean, Fred VanVleet's a shooter. Gary Trent Jr. is a shooter. OG's a shooter. Pascal's been a shooter. Precious has been a shooter. I mean, there's a lot of guys on this team that can shoot. There's just not really a lot of movement in this offense that generates great looks. And so, ultimately, you do look at guys like Rupert, who double down on the defensive disruption, which, quite frankly, sometimes I think the Raptors' point of attack defense was a bit suspect, and having a really switchy, very quick twitch lateral defender, like someone who can really stay in front of guards and also switch on wings, and potentially with some strength and conditioning could even switch on some bigger forwards. I mean, that's always going to be a plus, especially if you're trying to play fast and you have cross matching. So I think Rupert fits. With international prospects, sometimes there's a little bit of a boom or bust with them. Their range ends up being a little bit wider. So his range could be anywhere from like 30 to like 8, 7. If someone really falls in love with him, he's young enough that he could fly up draft boards so easily. Especially if some of the guys ranked ahead of him start to disappoint in interviews. One of the big draft philosophy things of who typically rises and who typically falls, a great rising example is Dwayne Wade. So in my opinion, the guys who rise typically are guys who interview well and work out well. It's kind of like, and who have misstated and sometimes misquoted or misrepresentative measurements. So for instance, I'm paint a hypothetical picture, someone who's 6'3", guard, 6'3", right? Typically that player can either go one of two ways based on wingspan, hand size, measurements. So if the guy ends up being 6'3" and everyone knows that he's 6'3", but then you do the wingspan measurement and he actually turns out to have like a 6'9", 6'10" wingspan, and his hands are huge and his vert is off the charts and he does like really well in the lane agility stuff and he interviews really well. That's the type of player where I could understand for most of the season he was probably ranked 25, but then by the time the draft comes around, he might be like, I don't know, 12, 13, right? With Rupert, his measurements are already off the chart. Everyone knows that. He's about 6'7". His wingspan could be anywhere from like 7'2" to 7'3". He's a decent, like a really decent athlete. His issue, honestly, from watching him, he doesn't rebound nearly enough for my liking. He has some issues with getting to the line, contact at the rim, some of the same stuff that we say about Brandon Miller, some of the same issues with him, right? Could that be strength and conditioning? Could that be, the impact of playing up against grown men? We don't know. But that's one thing that, I like about EuroLeague prospects is you're actually seeing them not being able to dominate players based on just strength, because a lot of NBA prospects, like you look at a guy like Cam Whitmore or, gosh damn it, the guy that he's all over the place. His name is slipping my head right now. But the guy for Ohio State, these guys are just huge. Like the people they're bumping up against, it's like, no wonder you're getting so much space. You're not going to get that in the NBA. So with Rupert, like he's physically less developed than a lot of these guys in the EuroLeague and definitely a lot younger. And the fact that he's doing reasonably well, his shot obviously has been very inconsistent, but he's a really good free throw shooter. So that should project well. Now, moving on. Who do I have next? Moving on to Jordan Hawkins. Okay, so to those of you who really like Anthony Simons, this is a comparison for Jordan Hawkins that has been pretty consistently there. Sorry, this is just Rayan Rupert again. Hang on. So with Hawkins, I think you see like a little bit of Simons. You see movement shooting, and I've been harping all year that the Raptors need movement shooters, guys who cut well off the ball, guys who shoot well. He's fairly decent athlete. I like him athletically, and his March Madness was amazing. And, you know, you sometimes want to be a little bit wary of guys who rise up the boards during March Madness and tournament play, Jalen Suggs. But, you know, in theory, it is the right time to be peaking, and it's a good time to be peaking if you're these prospects. Actually would be much more wary of a guy who fell during March Madness. Like someone like Brandon Miller, although of course, to reference and to be fair, he was dealing with an injury, and that should be noted. But yeah, so this is NBA Draft Room's scouting report on Jordan Hawkins. Hawkins is one of the best three-point shooters in a draft class and the best movement shooter. He's elite at coming off screens, catching and firing lasers from deep. He has greatly improved his dribble drive game and is now a real threat going to the hoop. Is an awesome free throw shooter, hitting close to 90% from the line as a sophomore. Plays both ends as a solid defender and solid rebounder. Isn't going to be a star defender at the next level, but it can definitely hold his own. Has good but not great size. Might struggle to handle bigger guards at the next level. So yeah, like, I mean, again, like if he was a little bit bigger and his measurements were a little bit more promising, I'm sure, you know, if he had Amen Thompson's size or whatever, like we would be talking about a top 5 pick. Now, one of my favorite players, and of course, everyone is going to be out on him within 2 seconds when I say that one of his biggest weaknesses, if not his obviously biggest weakness, is shooting, outside shooting. His form is a little bit funky, and honestly, you're going to have to develop that shot over 2 years. However, in the meantime, you know, if you can address shooting and some other part of your roster and, you know, work with him, this is a player who genuinely has top 5 feel, top 5 talent, top 5 brains, top 5. You know, I've learned to trust my gut with prospects. I love him. And he's been one of my favorites throughout this entire process. Like, he was one of my favorites, like, going into the season. He's remained one of my favorites throughout. I remember, watching some of his high school tape early, listening to interviews with his parents. And of course, these things, you know, they do give you a little insight into where he's coming from, how he's come this far. And, you know, with Anthony Black, you know, he's 6'7", 6'8". He's a point guard. There might be some feeling of, okay, do we not have Scottie Barnes already? Do we need to draft a poor man's Scottie Barnes? But I think they can play together. I really do. 2 guys who can do this, who can hoop, who can just see the court, who just have great feel for the game, basketball IQ. I think this is a very good problem to have, even if you stagger them on multiple units, to always have someone like this. I mean, early on in the season, we saw the impact of just having somebody like an Otto Porter or a Thaddeus Young. And I mean, granted, those are very different players, but the one thing that they do have in common is that they both know how to play basketball. And that's something that maybe you can't really say right now about guys like Dalano Banton and Precious Achiuwa and Chris Boucher, right? And sometimes Fred VanVleet. But, you know, even Gary Trent Jr., right? Like, I mean, there's a little bit of a missing element of the feel for the game, like knowing where to go, how to go, knowing how to set off ball screens, knowing how to relocate, how to, you know, space the floor properly, how to make, you know, quick reads, how to, you know, cut back door and cut into space, how to, you know, just genuinely know how to fill lanes. Like, it's so insane to me how often I'll watch a 3-on-2 fast break for the Raptors and someone doesn't even fill a lane properly. And that's something where, you know, with Anthony Black, like, he's really been coached up and he understands the fundamentals of the game and he has a real genuine passion for the game. So I really like him a lot. And he's a plus defender. Like, he's a plus defender. He guards really hard. He's a really solid athlete. He's switchable. I think he can guard 2 through 4 eventually. You know, down the line, I mean, I see a lot of Boris Diaw in his game. And quite frankly, I was a really big fan of Boris Diaw coming out of the draft. I couldn't believe that he slipped as far as he did. And it took a while, you know, He was in Atlanta at first, and, you know, they tried to play him as a point guard, and then they tried to play him as a power forward. But, you know, by the time he got to the Spurs and the Suns, like, he was incredible. And again, it kind of comes down to the the magic effect of what do you see? Like, I see a player who understands the game of basketball at a very young age and, maybe has a lot of the skill work to do, but the stuff that he does well is not really stuff that you can teach really easily to young players. It's not something you should take for granted either. So here's NBA Draft Room's scouting report on him. Anthony Black is a long 6'7" point forward with a very high skill level. He is a solid athlete with a big frame who can play above the rim and has sneaky quickness. Black is a great ball handler and passer who knows how to run the offense, whether he's playing point or playing at the wing next level. His passing is a major part of his game. He's not a great pass ahead vision. He's got great pass ahead vision and is always looking to share the rock. Honestly, like he has some of the same qualities as Alonzo Ball. He's also a solid shooter with a beautiful jumper, although not yet the volume 3-point shooter. Does a good job of getting his own offense when he needs to, though he tends to be a pass-first player. That's interesting to hear them call him a solid shooter because that's not how I would classify him, but to each their own. Although Black isn't an elite skywalker, he's a very good athlete who glides around the court and kind of makes it look effortless. He's not the most twitchy player, has more of a skill-based game that he uses his big frame well. He'll have to develop muscle strength over the coming years. Might not ever be a high volume 3-point shooter, but should be more consistent and comfortable from downtown. I am now immensely curious what he shot from the three this year because hang on one second. I'm just going to look up his stats real quick. So he shot 30% from three. That's 30% from three on 2.6 threes a game. Like, I'm sorry, that's not a solid 3-point shooter at all, but okay, sure. I feel like his mechanics do need a little bit of work. I don't like love the dip. But like I would not qualify him as a great 3-point shooter because if he's a great 3-point shooter, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to call Jordan Hawkins. Like I'm supposed to call Jordan Hawkins like Stephen Curry. Like, anyways, but nevertheless, like the jump shot is a little bit further than Scottie's at the same age, and I see a lot of potential for these two to play together. He's been widely compared to Josh Giddey. I think those are a little bit overblown because Josh Giddey's a bit of a pylon on defense and Anthony Black is not that. But, you know, if you're a fan of Josh Giddey, it's largely you see like he plays with pace, right? I do wonder what strength and conditioning and just getting into the gym is going to do for him as an athlete. I mean, it's far be it for me to say a 19-year-old is a finished product physically. He's obviously not. And, you know, with some strength and conditioning work, he probably could get a lot quicker and a little bit burstier. Maybe, you know, he's a very interesting athlete. Like, I think he's very balanced. That's one thing I noticed with him a lot is he plays on balance a lot. Moving forward to our final player, and this is Cason Wallace. And look, if the Raptors do get into the 11 range, he might fall. You know, some draft disruptive, despite not being overly long. He's about 6'4", although I suspect once the measurements come in, that'll probably be fact-checked to closer to 6'3". And he does have a reported 6'6" wingspan. He's tenacious. He plays the right way. He's unselfish. I think he loves to hoop. I've watched a ton of tape on him and a lot of interviews. He's someone that I flagged as this guy should be a Raptor when he was being mocked somewhere around 22 earlier in the season. Then he was starting to mock up to 16, 15, 17 range. And I was like, okay, that's kind of in our range. We're going to be a low-level playoff team. And now, once again, we're in the 11th range and he's mocked between 8 and 14. And you know, one of the things that the Raptors do tend to look for, if you look at Pascal, Scottie, you know, OG, you look at their draft successes, there's a call it a +6 wingspan, right? Scottie's 6'8", 6'9", wingspan about 7'2", 7'3". Some say as long as 7'4". So it's like a really strange thing where they consistently draft these guys who have these massive wingspans. And Cason doesn't, you know, he's closer to about 6'7", 6'6" wingspan. And that's not a massive reach advantage by any means. That's kind of the same, his body type is kind of like the same as Gary Trent. He might even be a little bit smaller than Gary Trent, but his lateral quickness is incredible. His hands are incredible. And just look at what NBA Draft Room said about him. He's a 6'3" lead guard with big time ability who projects as a late lottery to mid first round pick. He's an elite level defender and might be the best perimeter defender in the draft. Wallace is a menace on the ball and racks up steals at an astounding rate. He's a productive scorer, can get his own shot from outside, and can penetrate the lane when needed. He's become a very capable and consistent three-point threat, especially spacing the floor and shooting off the catch. He's a good ball handler, but needs to work on his left-hand dribble, doesn't have a great first step or blow-by speed, and doesn't get great separation. While he might not be a star at the next level, look for him to be a very long and successful NBA career, likely as a starting level point guard or starter level point guard. And this is, of course, a player who has been consistently, if not hilariously, always compared to Jrue Holiday. And I'm not a really big fan of NBA, like comparisons. Like typically they tend to be pretty lazy. 7'5", 7'6" guy like Zach Edey, boom, Boban Marjanovic. Sometimes the comparisons are lazy. With Jrue, I think Drew's a little bit bigger, a little bit longer. But I see where they're coming from on it, right? It's not just, oh, they look similar or whatever. And there's probably a little bit of that coming on, but it's just how he hounds the ball. It's how he suffocates a defender. If you watched what happened to the Raptors just a couple of days ago, Fred VanVleet getting blown by again and again and again by Zach LaVine. If you see how the Raptors like to play, which is pressure, like up top. Now, why are they playing pressure defense up top, I think is a question worth exploring. And since nobody asked it in the mailbag, I'm just going to ask it myself. Why is Fred VanVleet pressuring Zach LaVine 28 feet from the basket and giving blow by after blow by? Well, simply put, when you're small and you don't have much of a wingspan, you can't really contest a shot unless you're like right under the defender. Fred VanVleet is like most teams have a player in the starting lineup. Like every player in the starting lineup is bigger than Fred VanVleet for most teams, right? Whether you're talking Jrue Holiday, whether you're talking Andrew Nembhard, look at the players who have carved this guy up over and over. Look at the Detroit Pistons. And they can barely play him against the Detroit Pistons because Cade's too big and Jaden Ivey is too big. I mean, look at the direction the league is going. I mean, Markelle Fultz, he can't stay in front of Markelle Fultz. Jalen Suggs, he can't stay in front of Jalen Suggs either. But the problem is that if he's not pressuring, like super pressuring, those guys can just shoot right over him and he can't do anything to contest it because he has no vert, no burst, and he has very limited, basically, this is like a fighting thing, right? There are certain fighters, they have a reach advantage, right? So like, I don't know how much you guys know about fighting, and I'm sorry, there's like 72 comments, and I apologize that I have not been reading them. But if you look at certain fighters, like they need to get really close to you. And if you fight a fighter, like if you're boxing against somebody, for instance, right, and they have a massive reach advantage to you, what do they always say? Go into him. Get into him, get into his body. You cut down the reach advantage. It's the same thing in basketball. It's so much of the same stuff in basketball because ultimately, if Zach LaVine has 4 feet of space, then Zach LaVine has 8 feet of space. That's just how it works because Zach is quicker, right? So the space, right, to attack, the only way that Fred VanVleet can do anything as a defender is to literally hug the offensive player at the line. And of course, it results in blow by after blow by because his lateral quickness is nowhere where it used to be. And so he often gets caught with his hand in the cookie jar. He's very good at it, obviously. Systemically, he's a reason why the Raptors get so many steals or why they're so disruptive. And I understand why he works in Nick Nurse's system, but it also offers a bit of a predictable defensive strategy for the other team because they all know that he's going to be guarding them that way. And, once you figure it out, once you know how he's going to guard you all the time, because he can't guard you with any daylight because he can't contest your shot, then ultimately, I guess what I'm trying to drive at is if Cason Wallace was in place of Fred VanVleet, you win against Chicago because he can actually guard a guy that close, but he can also get off a foot and still contest your shot. He has good size for a lead guard. decent playmaker. If I'm thinking like Scottie Barnes is my point guard, but maybe I'm not comfortable with the idea of Scottie picking up full court with guards, like really quick twitch guards. And, if we've seen it, he has issue navigating screens. He sometimes, struggles. And that's normal. He's 6'8" and he's a very big human being. He shouldn't be able to move around. Ideally, he shouldn't be able to move around like Jrue Holiday, right? But I appreciate that he's trying to, but I think it would really help to be able to put someone like Cason Wallace next to him. Long term, I would be very bullish on a, off ball lead guard, like that prototype, like a Jrue Holiday, like a Derek Fisher, that type, right? Like a guy who doesn't need to dribble the ball all the time. He can kind of play off the ball and he's very comfortable at it. He's a very good shooter. I would do like anything if I was the Raptors to make sure that I get Cason Wallace. I like him more than any player that I mentioned so far. And yeah, there's a reason I've been talking about him all year. I love him. So thoughts on Bryce Sensabaugh? Like I've heard, a lot of people talk about this. A lot of people talk about this guy. I find him very slow. I find him very sluggish. I find him very big. He's an elite shot maker at the college level, but I don't love how his team played. And, you can argue that, okay, well, he did what he could, but I don't like him. I don't like his foot speed as a defender. And if I have issues with your foot speed in the NCAA, I'm definitely going to have issues with your foot speed in the NBA level. And I have watched enough basketball to say I don't want to be building anything around a negative defender at the next level unless that player is like a superstar. So if you got Luka level defense, you better have Luka level offense. Because if you don't have Luka level offense, you don't even have how good do you expect him to be offensively, right? That's kind of why I was a little bit bearish on Paolo last year. I didn't see him as a superstar, and I'm like, there's some serious issues here defensively. So you can bank on maximized offensive upside, right? And I get that, but I would rather bank on, like, put it this way: would I prefer a 90 offensive player who's a 40 on defense, or would I prefer like an 85 offensive player who's 75 on defense? I find that the 85 on offense, 75 on defense model seems to work a lot better. And oftentimes when I think about players, I think about portability. I think about how easily it can shift you between certain roster builds and certain lineups. The more positions you can play, the more styles of basketball you can play. Like if you're a great transition player, but you really struggle to create for yourself in the half court, well, now I have to adjust every lineup with you to make sure that we are playing more in the full court, right? So I feel like he's more of a half court bruising, type of scorer who's a little bit slow footed, and I'm not really a huge fan. He's been mocked anywhere from 35, 38, all the way up to 11. People are all over the place on this guy. More or less lately, I've seen him move up draft boards, but I'm very curious to see how that works out. I do want to say that my track record last year was abysmal. I also said that, Ben Mathurin was not a great pick. I also said, who did I say wasn't a great pick? I said Paolo wasn't a great pick last year. So please understand that I am not like some draft czar god, but I have done more research this year than I ever did last year. And I am someone who has predicted the last two Raptors draft picks very early on. So Christian Koloko last year, I was talking about Christian Koloko as their guy in January. And with Scottie, it was as early as April. I think it was April. April was the first message, and then I went on a whole bunch of shows in May to talk about Scottie and why he was a great fit. So I have implicitly sort of understood why the Raptors draft guys that they draft. And yeah. Well, yeah, so the problem is that with Sensabaugh, right, like he is mocked sometimes as high as 11, right? But he's also mocked as low as 30 by some people. I think his eventual draft position is probably going to be like end of lottery, mid first round. But who knows, man? Like, someone could fall in love with him. It happens every year. He's an amazing shooter. Yeah. Here, I'll flash his stats on for anyone who's kind of looking at him. Um, he's a bit of a combo forward, which I mean, you could say like he shot 40% from three. Like he's very lights out, and he did it on really good volume. 4.5 attempts a game. So I mean, yeah, he was a certified bucket. Um, but again, defensively, like there's some issues here. Also, like personally, it's kind of like what I call the Cade issue, right? Which is what do you do when you don't have the ball right now? He was kind of the man in high school. Now he's been the man at Ohio State. He has a 34% usage. Um, I don't know. Um, Here, I'm just gonna put his advanced stats on for you guys. And per 100 possessions, he scored 40 points. 40 points, 13 rebounds. Like, but I mean, where's the creation for others? Like, it's 2.8 assists. So it's like, this is what the guy does. Like, he just scores, you know? But it's like, there's a lot of guys like that, in my opinion. Hoodie Mellow, Scottie is a bum. Meh. Sure. Okay. Um, I don't know if there were, I apologize. I've missed definitely a ton of the chats. Sorry. Um, and I also apologize if I feel a little bit discombobulated. I just got like a pretty got a pretty I don't want to say like tough message, but like a message that makes you that needs processing. Like 2 minutes before I got onto the live, so I apologize if my attention feels a little bit all over the place or um all right, cool. So now that I've gone through the comments, okay, so I'm gonna look at our mailbag and I'm gonna just go through these questions really quickly and then we'll call it a day on this live. And maybe for the first time ever, I'll say it was an hour and it'll actually be an hour. Although knowing me, it's probably gonna go to like an hour and 10 minutes. All right, so hang on. Okay, so let's get to the questions. Okay. All right. Wow, there's a lot of questions. I'll try to answer these really quickly. What do you think of Amari Bailey, aka Drake's son? Um, Interesting prospect. Uh, I was actually really looking at him as someone who could possibly fall into our laps early on in the season when we still had a second round pick, the one that we traded for Jakob Poetl. Um, because potentially we could have been, we could have bottomed out and finished maybe fifth, in which case we would have had a 35th pick. I see him probably being drafted between 28 and 35. So I was like, maybe we get him, but I don't think we would use a lottery pick on him unless they see something in him that I'm not seeing right now. How do you think Masai and Bobby feel about Fred babbling? That's a really good question. Um, I I don't know how they feel because I don't speak for them and I don't know them, but I know how I would feel if I was in their position, and I would feel that um, it's not it's not a very it's not very encouraging to see that from a leadership position. And you know, you have to ask yourself at some point, like, is Messiah a good leader? And I think he's a great leader. Everything I've ever heard about him, everything I've ever seen from him, suggests to me that he's a great leader. So hopefully he can see poor leadership. Um, who is the GOAT? Michael Jordan. Although I will tell you that one of my most unpopular takes, and people hate it, like they really hate it, is I put Tim Duncan top 5 in my GOAT pyramid or GOAT pantheon. Um, Sorry, I realize you guys are asking questions. I promise if there's some time left on the hour afterwards, I'll take a couple questions in the chat as well. Um, Why are you so sure Fred and Scottie don't like each other? I plead the fifth. Okay. Thoughts on DR? Should security have kicked her out? Absolutely not. I was thinking of making an entire video, but I didn't want to give this any more attention than it did. DeMar DeRozan and Kiara should be so proud of their daughter for what she did. I mean, think about yourself at age 9. I remember myself at age 9. I was scared of my own shadow. I was afraid to speak up. I was afraid to speak out, much less go into a crowded arena on the road and scream like bloody murder in front of all these fans and everyone's looking at you. I mean, my God, if you are raising a child out there, unsolicited parenting advice from a non-parent, raise that person to be more like DeR DeRozan, someone who is outspoken, who supports, their family. I mean, it's a great thing. I read some disgusting messages on a Facebook group, and I don't want to give those people a platform, but they were ridiculous and they were racist. And there's an undertone of racism in them, which, calls DeMar a hood rat, says she's not well behaved and all this stuff. And it's it's so annoying. It's so frustrating because it was really nice to see. And to anyone out there who's really annoyed because it hurt your ears, it's supposed to be annoying. But just imagine how you would feel if that was your daughter and you were on the free throw line for the other team. Like if you were, DeMar DeRozan, like how would you feel if your daughter had done that for you? I think they'll probably have that moment forever and they'll probably laugh about it. And, Scottie didn't really have much to smile about during his presser yesterday, but the one thing he did smile about was when he was asked about DR. So that's the right response. Would you trade Pascal for Jaylen Brown? Yes. Scottie's 3 things to fix this offseason. Um, 3 things to fix. I think his ball handling, his mid post counters and mid range, generally his mid range package, and also his flexibility, like his lower body flexibility, like lateral quicks and bursts. I've seen him be pretty bursty in the past. Do you have any more watch parties for the playoffs? I've never focused more on a game until I watched one of your watch parties. Yo, honestly, like I thought I was horrible during the watch party. I watched it back and I was just like sitting there eating popcorn like a weirdo. Um, I don't know. Would you guys want that? I don't know. Um, I have no idea. I don't think so. But there is a plan next year to try a color commentary track. So you basically mute and I'll find somebody to do play by play, and we'll literally call out like what play the Raptors are running, who's botching what, and give you like a really insightful broadcast as opposed to, people who just talk shit. Um, how good would Nickeil Alexander-Walker look in Raps gear? I would be down for that. What decision would the front office of the Raptors make that would really surprise you? Trading Scottie Barnes. Who do we pick up in the offseason or move to make this team competitive again? And that one was from 44 Heavy 4. Who do we move? I don't know, man. I'm all over the place on I think there's so many variables that need to drop first. Number one, I need to know where we're drafting, right? Because that's going to change a lot. Number two, I need to know if Gary and Fred opt into their contracts, because if their market softens, right, their answers were very non-committal yesterday, like whether they're going to be here, whether they're not going to be here, whatever. Sorry, I'm trying to read these comments. So I don't know what the contract situation is going to be and who's going to be on the roster, right? That being said, right, I would like them if like sorry, I'm trying to formulate my words carefully here. Gary's defense is a problem, but I've seen him be effective enough that if you put him with 4 really good defenders, he can work. The problem is Fred's not really a great defender right now, and neither is Pascal. And frankly, if I'm being completely honest, Scottie's a little bit, hit or miss sometimes defensively as well. I know he tries hard. I know his role is definitely complicated, but he's not like, none of these guys are Lou Dort unless you're talking about O.G Anunoby. And honestly, God forbid, if you trade O.G Anunoby or he demands a trade out, like your defense is going to crater. It's the scheme. Obviously, like, you look at a guy like Scottie Barnes, and if you're not using him this way, he can be very effective. God, he could be so effective. But I think it's scheme related. I think what the Raptors are trying to accomplish is borderline impossible defensively. But yeah, I think Gary makes it harder. I think Fred makes it harder. And I think someone like Pascal makes it harder. And obviously, I see all the potential in the world from guys like Precious Achiuwa. If the Raptors are monitoring, growth from Precious and Scottie, and if those two guys can take the step that we were expecting this offseason, but they can take it next year, you could almost argue that you could lose Fred and still be better. Like they can make up for so much just by being so much bigger and burstier, and your defense would probably get better, your rebounding would get better. You just there's certain things you can do offensively that maybe you couldn't before. There's matchups that you can pick on that you couldn't before. But someone does need to do a little bit of what Fred does, which is, the pick and roll ball handling stuff. So I'd be very curious to see how they address that. But yeah, Gary stays if Fred is gone. Yeah, but see, you don't control either. John Hamilton saying Gary stays if Fred is gone. You don't control either one of these guys, like what they're supposed to do. Like what they could both walk. They could both opt in. I wouldn't be opposed to trading whoever opts in. Like if either one of these guys opts in, I'm not closed off to trading. I've come a long way on Gary. I like him a lot more. He has a very unique skill set. But honestly, like, I'm looking around the league, Austin Reeves, I'm looking in this draft, Grady Dick. It's not like something you can't replace, right? It's not like he's not some beacon of efficiency, right? He's a tough shot maker. And he acts as a bit of a release valve for the offense, but so much of his limitations as a playmaker. Now, what I like about him is he's still on the upswing. So you don't know exactly the player that he becomes and, where he is as a scorer right now. If he can accept like a 6-man role, I think that'll also make a difference for me. Like if he's open to coming off the bench, I think I would actually keep him. And then really start to like grind in on his playmaking and maybe the bench is just his bench. You know what I mean? Like kind of like a Jordan Clarkson, Jamal Crawford, like that. Those guys were way further along as ball handlers, and he has to come a further way and probably creators and downhill gravity stuff. But he's shown some flashes for sure. So this whole thing about like Fred wants to stay, so Nick Nurse looks like he's going to stay and everyone panicking about this stuff. Look, what do you expect them to say? What do you expect them to do? You expect them to come out and say, oh, hey, my biggest bargaining chip, they don't like me and I don't like them. They're not going to do that. At the end of the day, like they have the Raptors as a bargaining chip. That's all it is. The Raptors are a bargaining chip, right? Fred has the threat of taking this phantom, 114 offer, and everything's going to be leveraged against that 114. If the Raptors are, like super duper, sour on him, maybe they won't play along, but provided that they're just going to let, just be loyal to him if they don't want him back, like, sure, they'll play possum, they'll allow other teams to think that there's still a offer from him, to come back to Toronto. I just don't see how you can justify bringing him back given the fan sentiment around him. Like, how can you do that? Have you ever seen the Raptors sign a player who is so universally despised by the Raptor fan base? Like, I'm not like suggesting that it's just like, a pocket of very vocal critics on one forum, or it's just our DMs and our channel. No, it's all over the place, man. I'm looking like Raptors Digest comments. I'm looking at freaking Twitter comments. Like I am seeing like 90% I'm out on this guy. And then there's like 10% that are just like, come on, we won a championship with him, Rudy Gay. We didn't re-sign Rudy Gay. So no, that didn't happen. We traded Rudy Gay. And I want to say about 2 months prior to when we traded Rudy Gay, he was a fan favorite. Like people liked him. People were really hype about him. I prefer Hawkins. Great name, Canadian social credit score. Otto Porter as a starter for next year. No, no. I think one of the things that um I would if we hadn't traded for Jakob, because I think that Jonathan Kuminga does not really impact winning. I understand the intriguing prospect, elements, and he's got certain potential as like sort of a wing scorer, bursty scorer. Maybe you can do something with it. But man, there's so many athletes out there who flash potential, but they don't do anything for you in terms of winning. They don't impact winning. I like young players who impact winning. And yeah, Kuminga's younger. He's on a way cheaper contract. I don't think it works one for one though. So, what else are you taking back? Are you taking back a bad salary? I don't even know what the Warriors would have to sell back. Um, if you were trading for Pascal Siakam, what do you think is fair value? So interestingly enough, that heavy.com article, and a lot of people are discrediting heavy.com. I looked into their writers. Honestly, man, they're accredited NBA writers. Like these are people with very long reputations. And the specific writer who wrote the Fred VanVleet piece has a really deep history with the Boston Celtics going back 25 years. So I know you probably haven't heard of heavy.com prior to this week, or maybe it's new or whatever to you, but don't discredit it as nothing because the people behind it are credible people. And there's a reason why they have access to the people they have access to. Now, specifically, uh, in that article, they pointed to the fact that teams around the league do not value Pascal Siakam like a superstar or a star. Um, you know, so yeah, I mean, you can say this is the consequence of being a late draft pick. You can say this is the consequence of having a game that, isn't overly beautiful to watch. You can say this is the consequence of having some really terrible clutch statistics. You can say this is the consequence of being, someone who started basketball late and didn't get all that AAU buzz and hype that, oftentimes, we have this idea of prospects like Zion, Lonzo, et cetera, that builds up all of this like favorable, let's call it like transfer forward value forever and ever with those guys because it's an anchoring bias, right? No prospect is ever as good as you think they're going to be at 15 when you first see their, hoop diamonds or slam online mixtape. But, some come close to that, like LeBron. I think LeBron did live up to the hype. Maybe Victor Wembanyama, and some people are going to live up to the hype. I think Scottie's living up to the hype a little bit. Luke is living up to the hype, but very few do, right? So I don't know why Siakam isn't valued that way. I would argue it's probably because people can kind of identify that he's a volume opportunity scorer. He's not overly efficient. I think the game changer for Siakam, if he can get his 3-point shooting up to like 37, 38%, I think that would be a total game changer. But still, like next season, he'll turn 30, right? Like there is diminishing value here. Like, I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine today and she was talking about like potentially trading for Dame Lillard. And I was like, bro, do you realize like Dame Lillard is owed 59 and $63 million at some point? Like, that's crazy. Like when he's 35, he's gonna be paying like $60 million. He's already not playing defense. Like for the last 4 years, he hasn't been playing defense. Like, whoa, when that quickness goes and that burst goes, like he's gonna be one of the most overpaid contracts in the league. And you could say, yeah, the guy works so hard, and it's just time, man, time. Father Time is undefeated. Let me see. All right, I think we got time for one last question. Ideal starting lineup for Raptors next season. Be reasonable though. Okay, Scottie blank. So somebody. I don't know who that player is yet, but somebody at the 2. O.G. Siakam, Jakob. So I don't know who that somebody is. You know, um, could it be this draft pick? they start a rookie and just roll the dice and hope for the best. And, if it's a Cason Wallace, I wouldn't mind it at all. I think he would be worthy of it. And, he can do a lot of the stuff that Fred VanVleet won't do, which is he move off the ball and he can shoot. He can shoot, man. He's a bigger guard. Like, I know that, look, Sean and I have been going back and forth with CJ Miles all day about whether Fred VanVleet is top 50. And I've been like basically telling him if he thinks Fred VanVleet's top 50, he doesn't know basketball. Yo, do a cross comparison on per 36 minutes. I know it's not the most evolved way of looking at it, but even per 75 possessions. Markelle Fultz versus Fred VanVleet. You think Markelle Fultz is a top 60 player in the NBA? Most people wouldn't say that. Fred's stats are pretty close. Okay. So if this was him in a contract year where he was trying his best and he geared up for it and he hijacked the offense, these are his stats, worse than Markelle Fultz. Where do you think they're going next year? I don't think you actually get much worse with Cason Wallace. That's going to sound like craziness, and that's probably going to be the hottest take I've ever put up in my life. But I think when you consider the switchability element of cross-switching and cross-matching in transition, when you talk about fit with the other four starters, how he moves off the ball, how he's a ball hawk, how he's really disruptive, he's kind of like a combination of Gary and Fred in a weird way. And Jeff Dowtin, in the sense that he can totally operate at 12% usage and be a happy camper. So I really like him. If the Raptors draft Cason Wallace on draft night, please know that I will absolutely be jumping for joy. That's a really funny comment. Thank you so much. Anyway, thank you so much. I would like to get into some off-season videos for sure, talking about free agency primers, what realistic roster builds could look like. But if you guys have any topics that you really want, please leave it as a comment when this video goes live in 2 minutes or 1 minute. When I end this live, you'll be able to leave comments. Don't comment here. So just leave a comment there on what you want the next video to be. And, we'll see if we can do a video or a live stream on it next weekend. Sorry, this weekend. So tomorrow, Saturday, this weekend. All right. Rupert. Yeah, it would be very interesting. All right. Cheers, guys. Have a great weekend, and praying for a Bulls win and Thunder win, please. All right. Cheers.